And we're live. Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Solvable Mysteries podcast. My name is Juras. This week I'm joined by Glenn Highcove, of course, who's joining me all the way from California. Man, how is your Friday evening right now? And are you excited to talk about this week's case?
My Friday's been kind of hectic and busy, but yeah, I definitely it's doing this case was interesting because once again it reminded me not just of like the obvious one that it always gets compared to, but also, like one or two other once again kind of cross pollinates with some of the other cases and some of the angles we'll talk about.
Of course. So this week we're going to be talking about the disappearance of Brianna Maitland. And before we do anything else, I want to quickly give some background to this disappearance case, and then we can jump right into it. So Brianna Alexandra Maitland was born on October 8th, 1986, and she disappeared under very strange circumstances on March 19th, 2004. She was only 17 years of age when she disappeared. For everyone who's watching this on our YouTube channel, you can quickly glance at the screen and see Brianna's image. Brianna, alongside her older brother, was raised by her parents, Bruce and Kelly Maitland, on a family farm in East Franklin, Vermont. In her youth, Brianna was extensively trained in jujitsu. Apparently, she was, I don't know what kind of a belt she had, because they have the whole belt system there with jujitsu, but apparently, she was highly skilled in jujitsu. On Brianna's 17th birthday in October 2003, she decided she wanted to move away from her parents' farm and become more independent, as well as to be closer to a group of friends who lived 15 miles away and attended a different high school. I kind of found that little detail a little bit interesting. I couldn't really find any more information about this. The only other thing that I found during my research is that apparently Brianna has been bullied in her current school, and she wanted to move away to another school to be closer to her friends. Brianna attended Misquoy Valley Union High School before transferring to Enosburg Falls High School in nearby Enosburg Falls, which is a town in Vermont, during her sophomore year. Brianna's mother, Kelly, stated that there were no serious stresses or family drama that would lead to Brianna's early departure from the family farm. She just wanted to be more, how should I put it, more independent and to change her, I guess, social life environment. After enrolling at this new high school, Brianna started living under very unstable living arrangements, and she actually moved in and out of several friends and ex-boyfriend's home in and around that new high school, but she couldn't really have a stable living environment. And by the end of February 2004, so just 4 months into her new high school experience, she dropped out of that high school and moved in with her childhood friend Jillian Stout in Sheldon, Vermont, approximately 20 miles west of Montgomery. So I want to pause the timeline at this point. Do you have anything you want to add at this point? Didn't you find the whole early moving out situation kind of interesting?
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of tip my hat a little bit, or I guess show what direction I'm going already with this. But yeah, as a parent, I found that kind of disturbing. Like I felt like at some point something got off the rails, and I'll just say before we even, I'll just say, not to belabor it, but yeah, I kind of I've heard exactly what you said in terms of like how it was laid out. Something doesn't seem right to me, and certainly regardless of whether something was bad or not at home, like at some point this fell apart. Like this is not an acceptable outcome at this point for like whatever lenience, you're letting this person move out before they're, 18, and now they're dropping out of high school. That's not good.
That's totally not good, and I've read some interviews from the parents. The parents said that they were not happy, but they didn't want to, I don't know, forbid her for doing this. I don't really know why, but I will agree with you. I kind of found that a little bit interesting as well. Now, to complete her education, since Brianna had already dropped out of that new high school, she enrolled in a GED program. 3 weeks prior to her disappearance, which, as I've said, happened on March 19th, 2004, Brianna was physically attacked at a party by a female former friend named Kiali Lacrosse. The motive for the attack was unclear. However, Brianna's father, Bruce, would later state that he believes it stemmed from jealousy over Brianna's interaction with a male peer at the party. Now, I'll have a little bit more insights on this party later on in the show when we cover the timeline. From what I've gathered, Brianna was sitting in her then boyfriend's truck, waiting for him to get in as the party was ending, and Lacrosse, knocked on the car window. As Brianna rolled down the window, Kelly punched Brianna in the face, causing a broken nose and a concussion. We actually have an image. Of how Brianna's face looked like after that incident. So we can see a broken nose and a concussion. Seems like heavy damage has been dealt to Brianna just 3 weeks before she disappeared. Brianna later filed charges against this Kelly Lacrosse. However, the complaint was subsequently dropped 3 weeks after Maitland disappeared, and police stated that Lacrosse was cleared of any involvement in her disappearance. Now, one could speculate here that perhaps Kelly Lacrosse would have arranged Brianna's disappearance in order to avoid criminal penalties or whatever. However, police state that Kelly Lacrosse had nothing to do with Brianna's disappearance. I guess we have to go with the police here. Now, without stopping here for too long, because I want to flesh out the timeline for our audience members even better, I see that you've noted in the timeline that, or at least in the profile of Brianna Maitland, that she has been known to experiment with drugs and was associated with people who were distributing drugs on a large scale. Dude, without stopping here for too long, do you want to go over that a little bit?
Yeah, so it's interesting because this is going to come up, of course, later on when we get to sort of the middle of the case and then the investigation afterwards. But yeah, there's some kind of like party scene that's going on where she's showing up with these two guys who are both alleged, and I think were actually found to be in possession of large amounts of drugs. And what this looks like it might be part of is a greater phenomena that I'll get into, where I guess during this period of time, the kind of big city drugs were making their way to like more suburban areas and college scenes, college parties. So you saw kind of almost an outreach by drug distribution gangs to try to expand their markets, and you saw some people kind of trying to get rid of this. So that's what's going on here. But and interestingly, it's drugs like to the point of it being like crack cocaine being one of the drugs that she allegedly had tried with these people.
Right. Brianna, as you've mentioned, had connections to drug dealers, mainly Ramon Ryans and Nathaniel Jackson, who were two known drug dealers in the area Apparently, their drugs came from New York City, and from what I've gathered, they would distribute them in the more rural parts of the East Coast. I'm not really sure about that. Now, in the weeks following Brianna's disappearance, the Vermont State Police, in the weeks following Brianna's disappearance, meaning after she disappeared, police received an anonymous tip claiming that Brianna was actually being held against her will in a house in nearby Berkshire, Vermont, 10 miles from Montgomery. That rented house was at that time occupied by Ramon Ryans and Nathaniel Jackson, the drug dealers from New York that I've just mentioned a little while ago. The rented house was at that time occupied by these individuals. It was searched by police. Various drug paraphernalia, of course, were discovered inside, as well as substantial amounts of cocaine and marijuana, but no sign of Maitland was found at that house. Now, at this point in time, I would like to jump to the more detailed timeline of the case. Some other finishing touches on Brianna's profile. Apparently, she was a free spirit. She had 2 jobs at 17, already had moved out at 17. I just want to say she's like the complete opposite of me, because I kind of feel like that's a very bold move for a 17-year-old. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. All right. Let's jump to the more detailed timeline of the disappearance. This will give us a better understanding of this case. All right, so I want to start the case at the timeline at February 27th, 2004, so around 3 weeks before Brianna disappears. Now, she attends a party with her then boyfriend and some other high school friends. Now, during this party, she flirts with a boyfriend of another friend. That's the Kelly Lacrosse boyfriend. Later on, Kelly, will punch her in the face. Now, I found this part pretty interesting because she already has a boyfriend. She goes to a party and she flirts with somebody else's boyfriend. That's kind of, that's interesting to me. That kind of indicates that these relationships aren't that serious at this point. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and I mean, also just maybe to try to be fair or take a different um, take on it. Maybe also like, if there's alcohol and other drugs involved, that definitely can affect somebody's behavior. Maybe make them do something um, that really they know they shouldn't do, right?
Exactly. Now, Brianna left the party to wait for her boyfriend in the passenger seat of his truck, and she was pursued by Kelly Lacrosse, who then knocked on the window of the truck. When Brianna rolls down the window, Kelly punches her in the face, breaking her nose and giving her a concussion. Now, Brianna files a police report upon her mother's insistence, although charges are later dropped due to Brianna's disappearance. Police have cleared Kelly of any involvement in Brianna's disappearance. Now let's jump to March 19th, the day when Brianna disappeared. This is 3 weeks later. Now, on the morning of Friday, March 19th, Brianna had taken and passed her GED exam, and her mother Kelly took her out to lunch to celebrate. Kelly reported that Brianna was happy, and in fact, they discussed plans of Brianna attending college. They spent the afternoon shopping at a local mall, and while waiting in line, Kelly said that something outside caught Brianna's attention, and she told her mother that she would be right back. Now, after checking out, Kelly left the store and met Brianna in the parking lot. Brianna's demeanor had changed at that point. She appeared, quote, tense, shaken, and agitated, end quote. According to her mother, Kelly, Brianna told her she needed to head home to get ready for her shift at the Black Lantern Inn, which was a restaurant. Kelly didn't want to pry and did not ask Brianna what was wrong or what did she notice at the mall. Kelly dropped Brianna off at her home. She and her good friend Jillian Stout were living at that point between 3:30 and 4 p.m. in the afternoon. Brianna left a note for Jillian saying that she would be home right after her work ends at the Black Lantern Inn. So, I just want to quickly stop here. Did you find that particular situation with Brianna apparently noticing something at the mall and becoming agitated as an important detail in this case?
Yeah, I mean, it really makes you wonder at that point, did she notice a person? Or, is it possible? I know this is a little bit of a while ago, so, internet or if mobile technology was not what it is now, but it makes you wonder, is it possible she could have surreptitiously gotten either like a text or like a missed call or something and realized, got reminded of something?
Yeah, that. But I wonder what could she be reminded of. Regardless, Brianna later on drove to work at the Black Lantern Inn, and she finished. She worked there as a dishwasher, and she finished her work at 11:20 p.m. and decided to head back home. Now, the employees and her co-workers at the Black Lantern Inn, they kind of stated that, they asked her if she wanted to stay over for dinner. I assume at the Black Lantern Inn after the work ends, they would stay there and would have dinner and whatnot. Now, Brianna told them that she had to go home and prepare for her work tomorrow in the morning at St. Albans, which was her second job in another town in Vermont. Her co-workers stated that she left the Black Lantern Inn, got in her 1985 Oldsmobile, which was registered in Brianna's mother's, Kelly's, name, by the way, and she was reportedly alone in that vehicle, and she drove away. So I quickly want to jump to the map now. So for everyone who's watching this on the YouTube channel, we're kind of showing the map. This is the Black Lantern Inn. I want to quickly take a little look at the scene. I assume it was this building right here. I'm not sure if it's maybe a residential house at this point, but sometime during the early 2000s, this was a restaurant. Maybe it still is, who knows, right? And now I want to jump to this other point in the timeline. Now, so she leaves at 11:20 p.m. on a Friday, March 19th, 2004. And we know that 30 minutes later, Brianna's car was spotted backed into an old abandoned house just a mile away from the Black Lantern Inn. And I want to flesh this little detail out a little bit. Right, so in the next day, March 20th, a Vermont state police trooper is dispatched to this abandoned house where Brianna's car is backed into. So this police trooper is dispatched approximately a mile away from the Black Lantern Inn, and he then finds Brianna's 1985 Oldsmobile backed in with into an abandoned house with minor damage. A piece of plywood that was covering one of the windows of the abandoned house was now de- detached, like no longer attached to the window, and was lying on the trunk of Brianna's car. The trooper noticed two of Brianna's paychecks on the front seat of the car, loose change, some water bottle, and a unlit cigarette scattered on the ground outside of the car. Yeah,
Yeah, so just to pause for a second there, just to, because there's a lot of like
of course.
second guessing later on, right? Of like, why didn't they do this or that? Pretend you're this trooper. I mean, when I put myself in that trooper's place, that looks like a drunk driving accident, right? I mean, that looks like somebody either went to go get help or somebody went to go pick them up, because like all their stuff, so even their cigarette is still there. The thing that's valuable that maybe somebody could kind of like force you maybe to sign over to them, I guess, like a check, a paycheck, especially. And paycheck's not nothing, right?
Right. The two paychecks were, I think, totaling in around $150, something like that, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
it's a lot of money, but then again, that it's interesting that she has two jobs, and boy, that feels familiar.
yeah.
Working crap jobs and getting crap pay.
Exactly. And, initially the trooper assumed that this car was abandoned by a drunk driver. The trooper had the car towed to a local garage and went to Brianna's work at the Black Lantern Inn to attempt to locate her. But as it was Saturday, the Black Lantern Inn was actually closed at that time. The trooper did not report the abandoned vehicle to Kelly Maitland, who is listed as the registered owner. So the trooper did not report the vehicle to Brianna's mother. Some witnesses came forward later on, stating that they saw this vehicle backed into this abandoned house on the day when Brianna disappeared. So from 11:30 p.m. to 12 a.m., a man was driving by this abandoned house and reported the car's headlights may have been on, but he does not see anyone in or around the car. Somewhere between 12 and 12:30, a second man driving by says he thinks he saw a turn signal flashing on this car, and at 4 a.m., in the early morning hours, or in the middle of the night, a former boyfriend of Brianna's saw this car, which he believed looked familiar. Now, this former boyfriend was apparently driving back to his house, to his home, after a party across the border in Canada, and he was getting back home at early morning hours. He did not recognize this car to be Brianna's one for 100% accuracy. So he decided to just drive away, and he didn't really step there to investigate any further. Now, I want to quickly stop here, dude, and look at this picture. Now, this is a picture of the actual scene. And when I first heard about this Brianna's Maitland's disappearance, I kind of assumed that I didn't realize that it was backed in to the house. You know what I mean? I kind of assumed that it was that the car hit the abandoned house head
Like
on. You know what I
like blew
mean?
through it.
Right.
Yeah, like a 80s action TV series. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, it is interesting. The angle is sort of strange, but then the front of the car, I think, looks a little too pristine. Plus, the reports of the headlights and things like that. You would think that would blow out at least one headlight going through a house like that.
Exactly. Now, 4 days later, 4 days after Brianna's disappearance on March 23rd, which was a Tuesday, Gillian Stout, Brianna's roommate, called Brianna's parents to find out if they have seen her. Gillian had initially seen Brianna's note on Friday before leaving to visit her boyfriend out of town for the weekend. When she returned home on Monday, March 22nd, she saw the note was undisturbed. Gillian assumed Brianna was at her parents'. Kelly immediately began calling Brianna's friends and checked with her employers. She then realized that Brianna has not been seen since Friday, March 19th. At this point, it's like 4 days into Brianna's disappearance. So I think very valuable time has already been wasted. 2 days later, on March 25th, Kelly and Bruce at that point have been unable to locate Brianna. Bruce returned home from a trip to New York to help locate her, to help locate his daughter. Kelly called 911 and filed a missing persons report. And upon Bruce arriving back to Vermont, they both drove around searching places Brianna frequented. They collected photos of her and handed them over to Vermont State Police. When the couple gave the description of Brianna's car, the connection was finally made between Brianna and the 1985 Oldsmobile towed on Friday, March 19th. Because at that point, up until March 25th, so up until 6 days into her disappearance, the connection was not made between Brianna's car and her disappearance. Brianna's parents at that point were very upset that no one contacted Kelly about the car being towed, as Kelly was the, registered owner of that vehicle. And by that point, it had been nearly a week that Brianna had been missing for. Bruce headed over to the garage that the car was towed to, realizing Brianna had left her ATM card, driver's license, contact lens case, eyeglasses, makeup, and migraine medication in the vehicle. Authorities had not found Brianna's vehicle keys and had not opened the trunk of the car, so Bruce pried it open with a crowbar. Inside were some more personal items and clothes that she had not unpacked yet from her recent move. 5 days after that, on March 30th, the vehicle is finally processed by the state crime lab for evidence and was returned to Brianna's parents. The area surrounding the abandoned house was searched by police and search dogs, but nothing is found. While authorities state they found no evidence of a struggle or foul play in Brianna's car, they reportedly did find physical evidence which they will not release due to an ongoing investigation. Between April 3rd and April 5th, extensive searches are done by over 500 volunteers of a 5-mile radius surrounding the abandoned house. Nothing was found, but the increased media attention brought out more eyewitnesses, including 2 people who drove by the abandoned house on the morning of the 20th of March and took pictures of Brianna's car backed into the side of the barn. Now, these people turned these photos over to police, who had not seen the photos of the car as it was found due to it not being investigated as a crime scene initially. They believed the car was staged and now suspected foul play in Brianna's case. So what this means actually is that, police, they, like, the The trooper who found this car on the following day after Brianna disappeared, he then had this car towed and he did not take any pictures of the crime scene because he just assumed it was, drunk driving incident. But now some people actually on the morning of the 20th were passing by and they found this to be a very strange situation, how this car was backed into this abandoned house, and they actually took photos. So only in between April 3rd and the 5th, police actually finally received pictures of the crime scene, and only at that point they believed that foul play was involved. So, what do you make of this point in the timeline? I'm just gonna have a sip of water and then I'll finish up the timeline soon after.
I mean, the thing is that I feel like there were like some complicated aspects of her life that probably had the cops known, had the police known that that was the case, they would have taken it more seriously than they did in this case, where it was like, well, when they first got there, it looks like some kind of drunk driving accident, or even just sliding off the road. I mean, you look at that picture, there's snow and there's ice, right? So from that perspective, you can't really blame it. But then, yeah, as the story gets a little more complicated, and it definitely gets a lot more alarming because, yeah, this doesn't quite match some of the other cases. But then I guess that the other interesting thing is, I don't know if you were about to get to this. At some point, um, another case gets looped in pretty early, right?
Right. Before we jump to the case that gets looped in, I quickly want to finish up the timeline. So, only a few more points. So, on April 15th, so almost a month after Brianna disappeared, Vermont State Police raided a house in Berkshire based on a anonymous tip that Brianna was actually held against her will by two known drug dealers from New York, the same Roman Reis, Roman Ryans, and Nathaniel Charles Jackson. Inside of this house, they found drug paraphernalia and large amounts of cocaine and marijuana, but no sign of Brianna. Brianna was known to hang out around Ryans and Jackson, and her close friends told law enforcement that Brianna had begun experimenting with hard drugs recently, including crack cocaine. Jackson admits to knowing Maitland, but says the last time he saw her was over a week prior to her disappearing. Now, in late 2004, on the same year when Brianna disappeared, police received a statement from an older woman alleging Ryans and Jackson murdered Brianna. A sworn affidavit is leaked to the local press where the woman claims Ryans murdered Brianna a week after she disappeared, mutilating her body with a table saw and then disposing of her remains on a pig farm. Brianna was reportedly murdered in an argument over several $1,000s. She had fronted the both of the drug dealers to purchase crack, which he decided to keep and not supply her. Brianna allegedly confronted him over the money and he abducted and killed her, storing her body in a freezer for over a week before disposing of her remains. Police were never able to find any evidence corroborating these claims. Police initially investigated claims that Brianna's disappearance was connected to the disappearance of Maura Murray that disappeared in February of 2004. She actually disappeared on February 8th, I believe, so that was 40 days before Brianna disappeared. Now, Maura went missing from Haverhill, New Hampshire, after a crash in a rural area around 90 miles from Brianna's crash. Despite the situations appearing to have some similarities, law enforcement ruled out any connection between Brianna and Maura's disappearance. So finally, I'm done with the timeline. I know it was kind of choppy and kind of all over the place, slightly, but we're now done with it, and now we can finally get into the nitty gritty side of the story. Dude, your take on the whole timeline, and finally, I'm gonna sip some more water, man.
Yeah, I mean, from that perspective, I gotta like look at because I know this is one of the things you had asked me to specifically investigate was the whole relationship, between her and the two guys that later there were these allegations made by somebody about them, and apparently, they're like there's this very detailed set of claims being made and allegations about what happened. I have to wonder. I have to play a little bit of devil's advocate though, especially about the fronting many thousands of dollars now. One of the things that I heard about them about well specifically these guys, but also kind of the kind of operation that they were, um, let's say, emulating or was common with them with this was that they wouldn't necessarily be fronting anybody, um, uh, uh, drugs or money. Um, so that doesn't really sort of mesh with what people knew about those guys when they were considered suspects, that they're not necessarily now. Now that being said, the whole thing is also weird because it's like, okay, well, what? First of all, where would she get the many thousands of dollars, right? If her combined paycheck for two jobs is $150, like you're not you're not saving up thousands of dollars very quickly, especially given that that's like net to her before and that's not even net of like other expenses in her life, right?
I feel like
So
that's
yeah.
maybe like a week's paycheck, and I could be wrong here. I think maybe one of the job could have been like, you know what I mean? So like, I'm not sure if they both combined were 150 or individually 150. Also, they could have been like a week's paycheck, you know what I mean? Because like at that point, I just want to quickly mention that she was only working at the Black Lantern for a relatively short period of time. I believe it was like a week or maybe 2 weeks, you know?
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. I don't want to be too like I'm too questioning of it all, but I just keep on thinking probably what she's doing is relatively low, for the U.S. at least,
For
low
sure,
paying,
for sure.
yeah, low paying labor, and that's why I had that comment. I definitely remember, I remember making those sort of low wage, kind of jobs, and it takes a long time to save up money. Like I had literally almost no expenses, and it took me a while to save up a couple $1,000s, let's say at like maybe a decade before this happened.
Right.
So, you know what I mean? And that was me living with my parents, spending money just when we would go see a movie or mess around with my friends, but like for the most part being frugal. So I'm like, wow, how would she even put together a couple $1,000s if she's like actually paying rent or, something contributing, feeding herself, etc.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a good point. The whole connection with her having multiple thousands of dollars, I don't really see how she could have had those as well. I think at this point in the show, dude, I think we could jump to maybe the other details of this case that I found interesting. We could discuss them, and later on jump into the theories. I know you have probably some additional notes about the two drug dealers and all of that. So I think we can leave that for the theories section of the podcast, if that works.
Yeah, it sounds good here.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Okay, so the first thing that I kind of noted down here that I found it kind of interesting how Brianna was actually flirting with someone else's boyfriend on the 27th of February, even though she apparently had her own boyfriend. But I think you already addressed this. You kind of speculated that since there may have been alcohol or even drugs involved, That's kind of you could kind of see that happening, right? Like young teenagers.
Yeah, yeah. I just think it's like, dude, there's a lot of stuff going on, and I think people act inappropriately when alcohol or other stuff's involved sometimes, or because things that are become naughty, you know what I mean, become attractive in that moment, maybe, and then of course everyone's like had their regretful moment the next day, I'm sure. So yeah, from that perspective, that was it. But yeah, it also there also could be something else going on, because there's not. It could be a little where there's smoke, where there's fire, there's fire, because like what was going on at the first school, what's going on. As I understand it, it's interesting to hear that there was bullying at the first school, because I heard about, from what I understand it, there was bullying at the second school for sure. Like there was some kind of, as I understood it, there was some kind of conflict going on, or some kind of issues. I mean, obviously the party, case in point, some stuff's going on, but even just her also dropping out, like things not meshing. I don't know. I mean, it could be that she was having some kind of academic challenges, and that's why that happened. And I don't totally discount that, but I find it pretty like interesting that there's like kind of a grouping of like an event. Like she gets assaulted, she's dropping out of school. Before that, she's having like social issues at the high school, and then she's having social issues at like the next place. And and look, I mean, I can definitely identify with that. I mean, it sucks if you're not fitting in someplace, but yeah, I mean, just something doesn't already feel so right about the whole thing.
Exactly. Now, the other interesting points in the timeline that I found was that Kelly, mother of Brianna, reported that Brianna was happy and actually was even discussing plans of attending college on the same day when she disappeared. So I didn't get any sense that Brianna was unhappy with her life, and I would actually discount the suicide or runaway theories in this case because of that fact. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't sound like somebody trying to make a quick getaway. There were none of those other like signs, like we had some other cases where people had done things that looked like maybe they were, preliminary plans.
Exactly. Um, I did found that whole situation with Brianna becoming tense and shaken and agitated after seeing something outside of the mall on the same day when she disappeared while she was shopping with her mother. Do you have any thoughts on that moment?
Yeah, so one thought was, I mean, maybe this is the one of the more obvious ones for everyone else, but I was like, well, maybe she had seen somebody following her. You know what I mean? So if you did, for some reason, this isn't, like I guess one of the ways you could get thousands of dollars is you could like, to use a term like from the old days, you could go out in the street for it. And I don't mean that in like a prostitution sense. I mean literally like going to a loan shark, someone like that. You know what I mean? So like it's possible she could have borrowed some amount of money from somebody who then, for whatever reason the deal didn't happen, you lose the money. I mean that stuff happens, by the way. That's what they think. Um, there's a famous rapper
Yeah,
who was killed from the 80s for that exact reason. Um, anyway, yeah. So from that perspective, yeah, that was my first thought. So then the other thing, I guess not to belabor that too much, is um, maybe like I mentioned before, maybe something reminded her that like today was the day you needed to either pay something, or I mean, one last thing I guess before I hand it back to you is um, sometimes people, especially people with like opiate addictions, sometimes they can be fine kind of in that middle period before they start needing the drug really badly. So like the drug is wearing off and they're starting to feel kind of bad, but it's still not like, if you don't know what you're looking for, you wouldn't necessarily know what they're feeling. But
exactly.
then maybe at some point, yeah, maybe it gets to a point, because I'll tell you some of these, like even this photo. I know I lied. I said I was going to get back to you. This photo, even this photo, something looks a little bit off in it with the smile and the, even the way her eyebrows a little messed up there, that's a little bit strange. I mean, it could be just like, school photo didn't catch her right, but I don't know. Something's up there.
Um, I think this photo looks really good actually, but at the same,
Oh,
yeah,
she's pretty.
yeah, but at the same time, I will say that I want to quickly stop here as well. She did have two jobs, and seemed like she was on top of her life, to be honest. I mean, she did finish her GED, and I don't think she dropped out of high school due to being like a bad student or anything like that. I think it was like some sort of external situation, her not having a stable living environment that caused her to drop out. So I don't think that a crack addict would be able to finish GED and have two jobs. You know what I mean?
That's what I wonder. I mean, there's some. You're right. A crack addict and the crack thing. I had a little note in there. I mean, she allegedly tried it at a party. I mean, that was the whole point of how these guys, the two guys that had the house with the drugs in it. That's supposedly how they operated it. Is they would go to a party, and then they would kind of like whip out like increasingly harder core drugs, probably as everybody started getting a little more into the party, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
okay, yeah, from that perspective, that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. Now, Brianna left her roommate Jillian Stout a note stating that she was at work and would be home right after. Now, to me, this indicates that Brianna didn't have any other plans after work, right? I mean, unless you think she may have had other ideas. I think the plan was literally to go back home. Like, I didn't find anything in my research that indicated that Brianna was actually trying to do something else, after finishing her shift at the Black Lantern Inn. You have anything else you want to add to that?
No, I agree, and actually, that maybe narrows some of the possibility about what somebody could be nervous about, because that makes me think like maybe she realized she was maybe being stalked or followed by somebody, and that it wasn't in fact tied to any particular pending transaction or maybe even past transgression. Maybe it could have been totally unrelated.
Exactly. Now, the police trooper noticed two of Brianna's paychecks on the front seat of her car, as well as loose change, a water bottle, a unlit cigarette, all scattered on the ground outside of the car. So, an unlit cigarette, water bottle, and loose change was outside of the car. Inside of the car were the paychecks. So I kind of wanted to stop here a little bit and just think. I mean, if there's an unlit cigarette and a water bottle outside of the vehicle, that would mean that either Brianna or someone else was maybe standing around and wanted to have a smoke and maybe drink some water afterwards. But that whole idea got derailed and those items were left scattered around the car. Didn't you find that kind of interesting?
Yeah, so that was like the other side of the coin with the analysis of like if you were the trooper arriving there, the conventional explanation was, oh yeah, like someone just like we said had an accident, someone came to pick them up, the tow truck's coming, don't worry. Um, but then yeah, the other is that maybe somebody got ripped out of their car, um, and like they didn't even get a chance to grab anything that was valuable, and that's why it's like it's what I mean. It's like someone's missing now. It's
Yeah,
not that someone left the car here.
totally. And also found interesting how the police did not report the abandoned vehicle to Brianna's mother, Kelly Maitland, because the vehicle was registered in her name. So, I don't know, just choppy police work, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, exactly. Now, uh, as I've said, a man driving past this abandoned house report somewhere between 11:30 to 12 p.m. in the evening reported seeing this car with the headlights on potentially. He doesn't really remember the exact details. Didn't see anyone around the car. Now, why this is important is because I want to quickly jump to the map, man. So Brianna leaves the Black Lantern Inn at 11:20 p.m. and as early as 11:30 p.m., someone already sees Brianna's car backed into the abandoned house with the headlights on and no people around it. So within 10 minutes, the car is already backed into the house and no one's around there. The headlights are on. I mean, 10 minutes and this is like a mile away. Well, it could have been as as long as 40 minutes potentially, but still, that's a fairly short period of time. So whatever happened to Brianna must have happened pretty soon, like definitely within the first hour of her leaving her work at the Black Lantern Inn. And I don't know, man. Like, you have any ideas or like anything jumps to your head? Because this is kind of wild.
I know it's weird. So this is where I guess everybody feels like there's a big parallel to Maura Murray, right?
Oh
Because
yeah,
of the really, I mean, a couple things. One is it's not even that far away from where it happened, so that was issue number one. But number two was, the same kind of thing, where like a car looks like the car had a a spin out, some kind of accident, which we now think maybe was a little bit alcohol infused, right? Depending what you believe about that day. And yeah, so same kind of thing. And then the car's gone, and then you're like, well, the person couldn't have wandered off because it's in the middle of a snowy, you know, field or like rural area, um, next to forest, etc. Where's the person going to go? That would be
right.
crazy. And then they never find anybody, right?
Exactly. I will say that it did, like, we're looking at the map right now, uh, and we can see the distance between Mora's disappearance and Brianna's disappearance, and it was around 100 miles away, and it happened 40 days earlier from Brianna's disappearance. Just to give some context for our audience members. Now, another witness saw this car a little over midnight, and he believes that the turn signal was flashing on the car. So I don't really think this potential sighting gives us anything to go off on. Uh, you know, then at 4 a.m., a former boyfriend of Brianna sees this car as he was driving from Canada after partying there and decides to just drive past because he wasn't sure if this was actually Brianna's car or not. So, these are the witnesses that saw the vehicle on the 19th. Also, like the people that took photos, they also come up later on in the timeline. Um, you know, so I don't know. I think at this point, I'm kind of done with like the interesting details of the actual day of the disappearance. We kind of talked a little bit about how it was 5 days after her disappearance when the connection between the vehicle and Brianna was actually made. So I would assume that the vital moments have had already been wasted, right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's like this, that, like you said, that diminishing window where somebody who's getting away with somebody or trying to even, let's say, hide a body, where they could go, and then that like circle gets wider the radius gets bigger and bigger the more time that goes by.
Yeah. And also another thing I want to mention that when Brianna's father Bruce went to the parking garage where this car was towed to, and he realized that Brianna had left her ATM card, driver's license, contact lens case, eyeglasses, makeup, as well as migraine medication. So this kind of, for me, screams that she did not leave on her own accord, and it looks like a perfect setup for foul play, right? At least the way I see it. I don't think she. I think something happened. She must have been kidnapped at this point, because even if she just left to find help, I mean, as we know, like multiple cars passed by pretty much moments after this, whatever this incident at the abandoned house was, like just moments after. So she didn't really need to venture like somewhere in the woods. She could have just literally stayed there and like even, I don't know, like tried to get help by passer people who were passing by. So there was really no point for her to venture out. And even if she did venture out somewhere, I'm pretty sure she would have taken her valuables with her, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean that part. I mean, not to diminish the value of her paycheck, but whatever value it was, yeah, you definitely think you would do that. And just, I mean, I don't know. I mean, whenever I see something like this and I see snow like this, I always I get nervous because I mean, what happens if you're stranded out there for a while? I wonder if you go out and by the road and you jump around, will people come to rescue you, or do you have to, wait for AAA? I mean, how do you even stay warm if you didn't bring, clothing for this?
Exactly.
But with this collision you're showing on
Mhm.
the screen, I mean, it looks pretty significant, right? I mean, it was enough to knock off a piece of the house. It doesn't look like nothing. I was trying to think, like, is it possible the car was left in gear and it was, you know what I mean, and then drifted in gear into the house? I don't remember. Did they say whether the car was in park or not?
I don't know. I didn't get that detail. I can't tell. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyways, man, the other things that I found interesting in the timeline that, almost a month after she disappeared, police received an anonymous tip that claimed that Brianna was being held against her will by the two drug dealers from New York, Ramon Ryans and Nathaniel Charles Jackson. They busted open the house. They found drug paraphernalia, large amounts of cocaine and marijuana. But they didn't find Brianna. So I don't know. What do you make of that whole? Like, who gave them
Yeah.
the tip? Like, who knew?
Yeah. So I have a I don't know if this is like going back a ways. There was a show called Chris Rock Show, which I think you can still find clips from on YouTube and stuff. Anyway, they had this one thing about, like, I forget what it was, like what not to do if you had drugs in the car. It was something like that. And it was like, don't bring a mad like girlfriend or ex-girlfriend or something, because she's gonna like tell the cops on you, like he's got weed in the car. Um, Same kind of thing where I couldn't help but wonder, like the fact that I think the person was like, I'm just gonna say, like, this is what I heard, that the person was identified as older and female. So I'm like, that could be somebody's mother who doesn't like their son's lifestyle, or it could be, let's say, an offended ex-girlfriend or sugar mama or something, with these guys, or by the way, an offended ex-customer, right? Somebody who's mad, could even be a competing dealer in the area. But whatever the reason, like to me, it seemed like a whole heck of a lot of like really specific details, and I thought to myself, gosh, what? Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, really quickly to interrupt here, because I think you might be making a mistake here, but I could be
Oh,
wrong here. In the timeline, there were two tips. So this one was apparently an anonymous tip that happened somewhere during April, that led to the busting open of the drug dealer's home. But later on, in late 2004, a older woman claim that
Uh,
you know what I mean. Ryans
yeah.
and Jackson mutilated her and stored her in some like basement or something like that. So these are two different tips happening. So the first tip happened just around a month after Brianna disappeared, and then later on in the year, another woman claimed. Well, I'm not sure if the first tip came
Right.
from a woman; it was an anonymous tip. But then later on, maybe it's the same woman. Who knows? Because you know what I mean. The first one was an anonymous tip, so maybe this is the same woman. For all we know, we don't know if the first tip came from a different person. But just really wanted to flesh out that there were two tips. But no, dude, please do go on with what you were saying because it makes sense.
Okay, that
Yeah,
makes sense. Yeah, I mean, yeah, okay, because when I was reading it, it was confusing about which case they were talking about because there's this big affidavit that has this whole bunch of information and specific details, and then about the body getting chopped up and all this stuff, and it's like okay, um, yeah, I was confused about what who said what in
yeah,
that case. Regardless, yeah, I couldn't help but think like I mean, you always see this no matter what the application is or the situation. Let's suppose you want to make trouble for somebody. Um, well, like if you allege that they had just drugs there, that might make it really obvious that like it was a competitor, sort of calling the cops on, feeding information to the police to take down, their sort of market competitor or somebody with a grudge, right? Who was maybe in the same business. So like what better way is something that's like kind of a hot case and everyone's looking at and then oh on top of it, my gosh, the person did like, know them and associate with them. Well, like that's a great way to kind of throw them under the bus. And then by the time the cops are done like tearing apart their house and seizing their property and and illegal drugs and things like that, like, well, they didn't find her, but they sure found a hell of a lot of other stuff.
totally. Yeah, well, totally. And I guess at this point, I am done with the details portion of the podcast. The only thing I want to mention uh, about this last, uh, you know, I guess, tip that came late in 2004. It detailed that the drug dealers Ryans and Jackson mutilated her body, chopped her up, stored the body at some different location in some basement of a house that belonged to some other women. So a lot of like strange women involved in this story so far. And that I also want to mention that even though the police did find drugs, and apparently the drug dealers were kind of booked for all of the illegal stuff that he had, they were never able to find any evidence corroborating that the two drug dealers had anything to do with Brianna's disappearance. So police never actually found anything that would indicate that these people were responsible for her disappearance. So it makes me question if these tips are real, and or is this like some sort of, as you've said, market competitors trying to take down their competition, or someone who maybe had like a bad time doing business with these drug dealers, you know what I mean? And yeah, man, I feel like I'm kind of done with my portion of everything that I wanted to cover. Obviously, we still have the theories and all of that, but before we jump into the theories, I want to ask, I saw that you put in some, like a lot of work in the notes for this week's show, and I wanted to ask if there's anything that we would be running past on your end if we would just jump to the theories right now.
No, I think you had a really comprehensive timeline just now, and I think that's a good point to jump through the theories.
All right, so let's jump through the theories, and I have prepared a few of them, and I would like to begin the theories with the uh, Brianna leaving on her own accord situation. So I would split this up in two theories. The first would be that Brianna decided to commit suicide, and staged the car. And the second one would be that Brianna tried to run away from her life. Now, I wanted to start off with this theory because I believe it's the least likely theory in this case. Personally, I didn't find any indications that Brianna was not having a, she was young and she was facing challenges, as I think all young people face sometimes. So I feel like it wasn't anything that would lead her to run away or commit suicide. She did indicate to her roommate that she was gonna be back home. It could have been part of a plan to run away or commit suicide, maybe, but I still think that she did in fact wanted to come home. The people that she worked at the Black Lantern Inn didn't report anything suspicious. They said she just went in there, had a regular day at work, and nothing was really going on. As well as Brianna seemed happy and cheerful on the first portion of the mall shopping day with her mother. Well, obviously until she saw something outside that made her tense. Before that, she seemed happy, and in fact, she also talked about potentially going to college and like bettering herself and gaining more experience. So I didn't get anything in this case that would suggest that Brianna wanted to commit suicide or start a new life. So your take on that theory?
Yeah, no, I agree. Nothing at all seemed to indicate, compared to so many others, where like the person was either like they took their belongings with them, or they took their money, or they took some kind of like favorite something. I mean, yeah, nothing. There's nothing, and even I guess compared to, gosh, what was the one recently where the person had to stop at the gas station and they got put on like a skirt at work, like a mini
Susan
skirt.
Swedell?
Wow, man, you remember this stuff so well. Yeah, that's exactly. So that's one where even in that one there were all these kind of like extra weird things that she had done that day, and all these calls leading up to it, stuff like that. So yeah, there's none of that here.
Yeah, exactly. One other thing that I want to mention, and it's a little point that I guess 2 years after Brianna disappeared garnered some media attention. There was a video leaked, or I should say released, from a casino in Atlantic City that some people believe it shows Brianna Maitland in a casino playing like some casino game. What jumped to that images? I don't have the video, but I did found like really grainy, stills. So these are stills. I think she's playing blackjack or something like that, and I guess this is the best still. I mean, it's super grainy, and I wish I could find the video of this footage. Maybe I'll just try to fetch it in the post production. Right now, I only have this still, man. So looking at this still, and this is happening in 2006 in a casino in Atlantic City. So this would kind of indicate running away, starting a new life. If this is actually Brianna. Now, this woman was never identified. So, that's all I have on this particular detail. And I'm not sure if you've heard about this little angle, but I don't know. You have any thoughts on this?
No, I didn't know that one. It's interesting with that one because you would hope that someone could identify themselves if it's not her. It does kind of look like her, I guess, albeit with a kind of a different hairdo. Um, I don't know. What do you think?
Super
Do you think
grainy.
it's
Super grainy.
Yeah,
I can't tell.
yeah. You're right. It's like a little bit of a potato cam. Um, yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, that's the problem is so many people look like each other that it's easy, like you said, with this like tiny, like kind of horrible resolution. Yeah, definitely a tough one.
Yeah, exactly. All right, jumping back to some more theories now, I want to now address the connection between Brianna and Maura Murray. So, as I've said, the two women disappeared within 40 days of each other. They were both at the same age range, or very similar age range. Both disappeared after apparent car accidents. Well, I will say in the Murray's case, it did seem like it was a real car accident. I would say in Brianna's case, it looks like a staging of a crime. And it was speculated that maybe both of these women were potentially murdered by the same culprit or culprits. Now, to give my take on this, I don't believe these cases are connected. Law enforcement also stated they do not believe that these cases are connected. I do think that Brianna Maitland's case looks way more, let's say this, well, they both are disturbing. I will say that I believe that foul play was involved in Brianna's case, and Maura's case was looking more like an accident for me personally. So your take on the connection between Maura Murray and Brianna Maitland?
Yeah, that's what I think. I agree with you that it seems like they differ where Mora, it looks like she disappeared herself, frankly. Um, but in this case, yeah, no, I don't. It doesn't feel right. There's like all these weird adjacent things, and they're not sort of like the Mori case where she had kind of a maybe a reason to want to disappear, let's say, or want to avoid some problems. It's not that I'm not saying that's the solution. No one should think that's the solution. Of course, that's always the thing we say here. People should get help if life becomes overwhelming. But yeah, no, I don't get the same vibe here at all.
Totally. All right, jumping back to some other theories. So I guess now comes the point where we should discuss the foul play theories. And one other theory before we jump to the, I believe, most likely foul play theories. It was speculated that Brianna's disappearance was connected to an Alaskan serial killer named Israel Keys. And in 2012, investigators that investigated a potential connection between Israel Keys, the serial killer from Alaska, and Brianna Maitland. Well, they were investigating this connection because Israel Keys was known to have committed crimes in Vermont, New York, Alaska, Washington, and Oregon. Uh, However, the final records showed that he was elsewhere on the day when Brianna was missing. And then later on that same year in 2012, Israel Keys died by suicide while incarcerated at the Anchorage Correctional Complex. I don't necessarily found anything that connected Israel Keys and Brianna Maitland's disappearance, but I will say I don't really know the extensive background of Israel Keys, so I can't really speak on this. I just want to say that once I read that it was proven that Israel Keys was in a different location at the day when Brianna disappeared, I kind of stopped at that point and focused on other points on this case. So I don't know. I just don't want to run past this. I wanted to ask, do you have any more information?
Nah, I think I'm with you. I doesn't. It does just sounds like they were just reaching, just hoping they could maybe blame this on somebody and have it all wrapped up conveniently.
Awesome. Well, dude, I think we now jump to the most likely scenario, in my opinion. And the most likely scenario is that there were foul play involved in Brianna's disappearance. And I see it going in three directions. So the first direction I see is Brianna was potentially kidnapped and murdered by someone that she has never seen before or someone that she didn't know. So the parents actually speculated that potentially someone got obsessed with Brianna, started stalking her, and actually hid in the back of her car as she left work. And then they abducted her. This would explain the really short amount of time that it took for whatever happened to happen, if that makes sense. The other way I see it happening is maybe Brianna was passing by a hitchhiker who had devious intentions and decided to help them out. And this is credible as well because Brianna is known to stop for hitchhikers and then help them get to wherever they want to get to. So this is the first, kidnap, foul play slash theory, and your take on this one.
That's interesting. I didn't even think of the hitchhiker thing because it's so not in my world. Um, it's not a thing here in LA so much. Yeah, that's that's sort of credible. I guess the only thing I wonder is why no sign of struggle in the car, unless, of course, the person pulled a gun or a weapon, or they had teamed up with someone else. So if there's like a second, so if the hitchhiker is just pretending, you know what I mean, and then at some point there's a car waiting to kind of like help double team who the driver is, that picked you up as the hitchhiker.
Yeah.
Maybe that seems plausible to me.
I think to me personally, this particular theory works the best with the timeline because let's remember Brianna leaves at 11:20 p.m. and then as early as 11:30 p.m. or like let's say like maybe in the middle of that sighting, so 11:45 p.m. someone already sees the car abandoned with the headlights backed into the abandoned house. So let's put it like maybe 20-30 minutes after she leaves her work. I kind of think that if it was like a, I don't know, like it this kind of works for me when it comes to the time span.
Yeah, I agree because it's so quick, right? It's like right down the road, boom, get into the car. So then I guess in that theory, that's sort of this is. Do you think this is random, or do you think it's planned, or do you not know enough yet about it?
um you know I'm not sure because if it was, well, it's hard to say. I think we could talk about what was left in the car. Maybe this will answer your question. So, for instance, money and valuables were left in the car. So, whoever did this must have done it not for the money, but for the thrill or for revenge. So, usually, when you do it for the thrill or for revenge, it's usually planned. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't a mugging.
Oh
Besides,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I let me it probably it probably sounded pretty asinine the way I said it. Actually, I mean it's so planned as they knew. Sorry, not planned, specific. So was it specific to her, or was it just a crime of opportunity?
oh, that's a good question. I really don't know. I really can't tell if Brianna was the target or anyone was the target in this particular crime.
Yeah.
Nah, totally, man. Totally. And this leads us to some more foul play theories. Now, the one foul play theory that is maybe less likely, in my opinion, but we have to talk about is Kelly LaCrosse, Brianna's friend who assaulted her 3 weeks prior and was facing criminal stuff, let's put it this way. But everything, those charges got dropped after Brianna disappeared. Now we can see a clear benefit. Like we can see how Kelly LaCrosse benefited from Brianna's disappearance. So we just have to speculate Is there any chance that this other teenager could have arranged such a hit? I personally don't see it happening, you know?
Yeah, I mean the thing is, the incident itself was really troubling, and I wish we kind of had a more satisfying outcome about that because yeah, I mean, Brianna ended up with like facial injuries. Have you ever seen anybody? Do you ever know anybody to break their nose?
Nah, not really.
Yeah, I remember I knew a kid uh back in my old days growing up. I knew some kid that got like jumped for a leather waiter's jacket, and the next day his face looked just like that. That whole like there's bruising right by the eyes and stuff. I don't think I don't think it was awful, but it's never good to get hit in the head. And like you said, there was some amount of like medical consequences from this, like a concussion and headaches, and then if you break your nose, sometimes you have to have. I mean, I'm not a doctor, so don't please nobody get too angry, but I believe you sometimes you have to have like repairs made, I guess, to like a deviated septum because sometimes it can affect your breathing. I I know this because Joe Rogan used to always talk about it with himself, and I think that's probably a good thing. How he couldn't breathe out of his nose because of an injury he'd had. So anyway, yeah. So there's like this as you said, there's this thing going through the court system, and then all of a sudden, oh, how convenient! The person that you're going to court with, um, disappears. Now, by the way, anybody that might think, well, this person has something to do with it. Well, I mean, come on, this is like not like a super serious thing. I mean, yeah, wouldn't want to be facing these kind of charges or potential like civil damages later, but it's not worth disappearing anybody over, right? So that would be this thing where like it would seem vastly out of like out of measure, out of what's the term? Like out of balance, I guess, with like the risk of getting caught trying to intimidate somebody not to let's say testify against you in a trial or something like that.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to be honest. And I would say that she was also a teenager, Kelly LaCrosse, and it was like some teenage drama, like a most likely like a drunk fight ensued. I don't think this
Yeah.
was the case. I would highly rule that out. Which leads us to the drug dealers, you know what I mean? Ryans and Jackson, who may have potentially kidnapped and killed Brianna because, if we would go by the tip of one anonymous tipster, Brianna owed, they owed, no, they took Brianna's money and didn't supply her with the drugs. And for this reason, they now decided to kill her or any other drug related situation. So I don't know. I think you've looked into the drug dealers a little bit more than I did this week. What do you think of this potential theory?
I mean, it kind of goes both ways because on one hand, I find it plausible that they could have been targeted with those accusations, like we said, by any number of people with a grudge against them. Okay, but then it is awfully weird that like these two people that are in like pretty much the almost the most illegal business you can be in, right? And the the illegal drug business is illegal. So yeah, I mean it's something. It's a trade that has huge jail sentences and even more massive consequences when you cross state lines, doing things like that. Like nothing, no part of it is like for the meek. So the fact that she was even involved with people that were doing that is like to me the same as somebody who's like a hanger on with like organized crime or a gang member associate or something. At some point, you're awfully close to like the wrong side of the law, and then the consequences that come from that. So that part bugs me. And then she disappears. She disappears, and it's not like this is you know, like the tough streets of Chicago or New York or LA, etc. Right? It's like a fairly it's like I'm looking at the screen, I'm looking at the map, and I'm like, look, it's like Green Acres. I mean, what's going on? So where did this person go? So that bothers me. So like that, and then the allegations and these very detailed allegations and all these things. Okay, so then on one hand that makes sense to me. I mean, what do you think in that in terms of that specific feedback so far?
No, I think that's I also want to go on about Dr. Grande's opinion, because I did watch Dr. Grande as well
Oh
before
yeah.
we rolled, and Grande actually said that the a random incident, random, let's say, abduction, crime of opportunity is unlikely in his opinion. And he alluded that he believes that the most likely outcome is that this was somehow drug related with the drug dealers. So I kind of have to go with him as well a little bit here, because um, I do think it's kind of suspicious how she all of a sudden disappears. She does have some sort of drug connection with those people. You know, she's involved with them in some sort of manner. We don't really know how. But when you think about what happened earlier on the same day, her getting disturbed, or with her mom at the mall getting disturbed, I think if that's somehow connected to the drug dealers, then maybe she realized that, I don't know, like like something caused her, like she remembered that she didn't do something, or I don't know. Like I don't think people had like cell phones in 2004, right? So she couldn't have received
Oh no,
like
no,
a.
no, no, they did. No, I mean definitely you had cell phones in 2004, so you could. I mean, texting and stuff was real big, especially I think in Europe actually texting was way bigger than it was here. But by then, texting was still like around. It's interesting to me though. Okay, so then on the other side of it, well, okay, if it's related to these two drug dealer guys, who to be fair, may also have connections to let's say other aspects of organized crime. Okay, so then the whole like theory would be okay. I don't find the drug deal thing very plausible for some reason, and it's not to say that she couldn't be one if she wasn't somebody that had like more access to more money. You know what I mean? If she was wheeling and dealing, it sounds like she was wheeling and dealing a little bit, but I don't understand like what could be worth making someone disappear. If there hadn't already been arrest, if she'd been arrested as part of like something. Well, wait, we'd know about it, right? So we would have heard about this aspect of the case. So that's part of it. But then the other part of it to me is like, well, okay, well then could they need her for human trafficking? So that's come up before in this case, was that apparently there'd been like a kind of a recent bust of some women that had been taken from out of like these sort of some of these areas and human trafficked kind of against their will to inner city. And I guess they probably had busted a brothel or a prostitution ring. And then this came up. Now, once again, I don't feel like she was the kind of at risk person yet. You know what I mean? That was because I feel like I could be wrong, but my impression from what I've read and researched the topic is that a lot of times the women, um, mostly women that are at most at risk are usually like hardcore drug addicts, right? Who are sort of in a point where anybody that sort of provides them with their next hit and then can keep them perpetually out of it, inebriated, under the influence, etc. That person kind of controls them and owns them, right? Like that's often how it's done. The person is then kept in kind of this perpetual drug state to the point where the person trafficking them feels like they can trust them not to run away, or that they're kind of like deep into the life at that point. That's not happening here, right? So that's like I mean maybe I guess people would argue maybe she's being set up for that with these two guys. What do you think of that theory that maybe she was forced into let's say prostitution or something in some other part of the country?
Yeah, no, I really think you made an excellent point about that most prostitutes, well, we could be wrong here, but we believe that they become prostitutes because they're like really addicted to drugs, and if anyone provides them with their next hit, they will, become prostitutes and maybe not even realize what's happening most of the time. Now, Brianna, on the other hand, she had two jobs and she just finished a shift at the Black Lantern Inn, and the coworkers didn't really report anything suspicious. So I don't think she was there, and I actually don't think she was even going to get there at any point, because she was still experimenting with drugs. I mean, we can't really know for certain what would have happened within the next few years. Maybe her life would have spiraled down out of control, but at that point, I didn't get the sense. So I don't think she was necessarily abducted for sex trafficking. I think she would have found her way out or would have been killed because she wouldn't oblige with the circumstances,
Yeah, I mean, I kind of I'll disagree a little bit on like the where she was headed, just from my own, I mean, just my own personal bias and experiences, and like I'll say like,
Of course.
I guess I'll try to kind of to protect everybody's anonymity. Let's see if I can say that word today, anonymity. Yeah, I mean, I do wonder like how, to me she does seem at risk, and I'll tell you it's because of the unstable school situation, and then she's working a couple of jobs, and then she's kind of busy partying, and I get a bad, like I said, the picture, I mean, it's a good picture, she's pretty, she's an attractive person, has a lot going for her, maybe is a little too much unfocused, or not enough long-term planning in her life. But I think like these guys, these two dudes, which like there's no illusions about these two dudes, right? Like she for sure knows what they do. Um, that bothers me a lot, where I don't really know like where that's heading, and I don't, or where she thought that was heading. And I think that the amount of like experimentation at that age, because I've seen it with certain people I know in my life, or or people that I know that know people, etc. Um, yeah, it's like it's something that can go off the rails really quickly, especially when the person is experimenting like that. So I think the part that where like it's kind of known that she tried, like crack cocaine, that part starts to scare me, because then yeah, that seems like somebody who was almost perfectly ripe to get hooked on like opioids, especially meth. Like someone who works a couple jobs like that, meth is great until it's not, right? I mean, I'm not speaking from experience, but from what I understand, that's why it's such an abused drug for people who are like what we used to call blue collar, working class, people who do jobs where you're kind of doing a lot of work all day, and got to keep your attention span going. Like I could imagine her getting hooked on a substance like that within the next couple of years.
Right. No, I'm not going to say that her trying crack cocaine isn't alarming. I'm pretty sure her parents didn't know about that. And if they did, they probably would have taken some action for sure. Because that crack cocaine, it's not weed, Weed is kind of, in my opinion, not as dangerous. But like crack cocaine, like it falls into the list of drugs that I think are very dangerous and you could get hooked on fairly easily. Well, it depends on the person, of course, but still. All right. So, since we talked about it, and I guess it would be time to jump to our final conclusions. But like, in your opinion, dude, this is the last question before I want to ask before we jump to the conclusions. Looking at this picture, looking at how the car was found, do you have any idea what actually went down, or do you have any hunch of how Brianna disappeared and how this car was left in this position?
You know, I sort of, I favor the Dr. Grande explanation. I think to some extent. I mean, I do wonder in terms of like still the lack of, well, until recently we thought there was a lack of DNA evidence. Now they say there is some DNA evidence, and we just need to kind of hang in there. Um, I find it a little bit troubling, unfortunately, that I think I mentioned in the past what a fan I am of the what I call like DNA triangulation, where even if the person whose DNA sample you have, who by the way would include the two guys who had been accused earlier, um, even if you don't have their sample for whatever reason, like the person's never been to prison or county jail or some other system that would have taken that sample, um, you can still potentially find them through a relative. Well, recently, one of those cases, I believe, was actually overturned. One of those convictions that was a big case where they solved a case, and now for some stupid, you know, legal loophole or whatever, and that's I think we were talking about this earlier about people's legal chances. Yeah, sometimes people get a little too much chances. So case in point, I'm a little worried that like that sample, and I've seen that the same comment on Reddit and other places. People are worried that that same sample will not actually end up to a conviction now because like sort of the investigators have their hands tied behind their back a little bit more now than they used to.
Right, right, right. It is interesting what they meant by DNA because police did release information, if I'm not mistaken, in 2016 or maybe like earlier in the year. I'm getting my like times confused a little bit, but they did state that there now is DNA that was recovered from the vehicle way back then, and they're not gonna tell us more about that because it's an open investigation. All right, man. But in terms of how it all happened, uh, would you say that maybe someone snatched Brianna at this house? Was she meeting someone in this area? Because this abandoned house was not like a random abandoned house. It was actually known in the surrounding areas as like some Dutch Dutch something like abandoned house. It was like a spot. I get the sense that this was like a spot where maybe people would gather. So was she meeting someone here after work, which kind of would make maybe the most amount of sense to me? Or do you think that someone waited in the back seat of her car and as she was driving, they pulled out a gun on her? Or do you believe that this was a hitchhiker or a person pretending to be a hitchhiker that would do this? Now, if we think that this is crime connected to her surrounding people that are involved in her life, like the drug dealer, etc., etc. I don't think that this could have been a hitchhiker because the probability that she will stop for a hitchhiker is fairly low. Like, how can you be sure that Brianna will stop for you potentially? So I only see it happening in two ways. I only see someone sitting in the back of her car and pulling out a gun soon after she starts driving. It is worth mentioning that her co-workers at that restaurant that she was finishing her night shift at, they stated that they didn't see anyone else in the car. So that's one reason that works against that. So obviously maybe the person was hiding well in the back seat, but he was never, or she was never seen. And now this kind of leads me to think that the most likely scenario is, and also how would they get into the backseat of the car? I mean, you have to, like, it's not like the car is probably going to be left open, right? You still need the keys to open the car. So how are you even going to do that? So this kind of leads me to believe that she was most likely meeting with someone at this particular spot. Then she gets kidnapped. The car is then rammed into the back of this house in order to stage a potential accident, and then someone kidnaps her, and then I don't know what happens after that, but I think that she is killed fairly soon afterwards.
Yeah. But wait, what's that case we handled? What was the where the young lady was up in Canada and had kind of a there was a similar case to this, right? Somebody who had gone off kind of independently on their own from their family. It was not totally the same, but it was a little bit. It was sort of like this case was almost like that same person in the making. anyways, I can't remember the name
Totally,
of
totally. I'm
yeah,
gonna
so
try
it's a
to locate it, but yeah, I know
yeah.
exactly what you're talking about. You are most likely referring to. Give me a second here, man. Okay, I can't really find. I can't really find this case. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean that's the one, but you know what I mean. Like, there's a lot of similarities there. There's like a lot, like, working multiple jobs and sort of like free spirit, and then maybe some either social issues or like just more pressure. Now, what's not the same is, in that case, we saw some issues that look like mental illness, um, and in this case, we don't. So once again, it's like absent. What is absent is almost more important than like what jumps out at us, I guess, in terms of eliminating some of these circumstances. Yeah, I think I agree with you. Like, what I was thinking is, what might work is, um, the hiding in the backseat. I think could work, because that car is like some kind of '80s car, right? It looks like some kind of an '80s General Motors car. It's like a Chevy or an Oldsmobile or something. What was it again?
It was a '85 Oldsmobile.
Yeah, yeah. I bet you anybody with a Slim Jim can probably unlock that car pretty easy. So, do you know what I mean by a Slim Jim?
Yeah,
It's
I
like
know.
yeah, yeah, flat piece of metal. Anyway, yeah. I mean, I've seen it. I've seen those things at work. They're pretty fast. So I feel like somebody, like those cars, that crappy '80s anti-theft, whatever. So yeah, I bet you someone could get in there. But yeah, whether they're actually really going to wait for the person for her in the back of that car, um, I don't know. Once again, you would think there would be footprints or something, but maybe that's all gone afterwards, and the snow melts, etc. They didn't take it seriously, so they never checked. Um, yeah, so maybe what if someone forces her off the road or intimidates her off the road? Like, it's somebody she knows, then I guess why? Why do it? What's the reason? Some kind of business dispute around the drug business, even though that doesn't seem as likely,
Hmm.
it still makes more sense to me than trying to like force her into um human trafficking, which, like, the other part I forgot about that part is, um not only was she not as at risk yet, she kind of is in, I mean, we'll just say it, she's in a specific demographic. I mean, we've called it like the missing white woman syndrome. But, like, I mean, can you think of somebody who would be less problematic to kidnap? Because she gets kidnapped and forced into, everyone's looking for her, right? And at some point, like that you know what I mean, that's going to potentially bring more unwanted scrutiny to your illegal operation than just finding somebody who, like, society doesn't seem to care about.
Totally. Really
Yeah,
quickly, dude, wanted to step in. The Emma Filippov case was the one that you were referring to, and
that's
it's
right.
and it's
Yeah,
actually over a year ago. For some reason, I thought that we covered it like just like 4 or 5 months ago.
I know.
No,
It's funny. It feels so recent. Wow, that's amazing. It was even that long ago. Yeah. Anyways, yeah.
episode 62, man. Oh, another thing I wanted to add to what you're saying, dude. Sorry for interrupting here. The one thing I wanted to mention here is that I found it strange that okay, so I don't think this was a kidnapping, a devious type of a setup, like or I mean, it was a devious type of a setup. I don't really see how someone would sneak into the car and would just kidnap her like that, or someone would hitchhike and then kidnap her on purpose, because I feel like if you wanted to kidnap and kill Brianna Maitland, you could probably do it at better points in time, like not maybe in like a better situation. So I do think she was meeting someone at this abandoned house. Now it leads us to think, I mean, who could she have been meeting here? And I think it might have been something like drug related. I don't really see her like friends or like the whole teenage drama being like the reason behind this. I feel like, or maybe it is, like, who knows, right? I mean, yeah, sorry, man.
Well, I mean, no, I mean, from that point, then that actually does sound like, I mean, to me, that sounds like a problem then, right? That sounds, I guess, if you're having to go meet people, you know, late at night to buy your illegal drugs, you might have a drug problem. And then once again, I got to ask, like, how much of her money is going towards that, unless it's, as people allege, if it's a bigger business deal, then I don't understand where the capital, the cash, where the money comes from to do that, and then what she was expecting to do, because like, who was she going to sell to? Unless, of course, all of the people that she was going to sell to are those same friends who told us enough to implicate those two guys, but weren't clear maybe on their own drug habits, if that was the case, right? But there's a lot of stretching going on to make that theory work, I guess.
Totally. So yeah, dude, I think it's time to like conclude our own thoughts here. So what would you say is the most likely outcome for the disappearance of Brianna Maitland?
I'm gonna go, let's say 60%. It was somebody that she knew, so that's pretty broad. But I'm gonna say it's that 60% someone she knew disappeared her. And then I'll put maybe 15% that human trafficking explanation, and then what am I? I'm only got 25% right.
35, I think. Oh yeah, 25. 25, sorry.
25%. I know everyone's gonna laugh at me with my math. Yeah, let me just say I'll do the other 10%, maybe like some kind of misadventure. My usual fell in a hole or fell in the river reasoning. And then the final was I 15%. Final 15% would be like that random person. So like we talked about last week, crazy as it seems, sometimes somebody will run into one misadventure, and then, I mean, unfortunately, it happens more than you would think, especially because apparently testosterone is a heck of a hormone, and I'm not anti-testosterone because I'm a man too, but it does seem to influence some amount of antisocial behavior inordinately, and yeah, from that perspective, like sometimes someone who's a victim becomes an even bigger victim because they run into the wrong random scumbag.
Totally, man. I will agree with you. I just want to say that for me, the most likely scenarios are that she met someone here and it didn't go according to her plan. She was kidnapped and killed, or she got into an argument and then she was killed, and not necessarily kidnapped, but her body was stashed. So I will be leaning towards the drug related outcome here, that somehow either she was buying drugs or meeting with shady people here and she got killed. I will not completely discount that this was some teenage stuff as well, because teenagers do stay up late and it was a Friday. So on a Friday, teenagers sometimes, they stay up late. They may have wanted to meet up here. Maybe she was meeting up with some, I don't know, new like romantic interests that gone wrong, or you know what I mean. Like I see like ways that could happen, and things could go sideways really quickly. It is interesting that there was no foul play found at the scene, which probably indicates that the person used a gun on her. And I don't think that maybe a romantic interest would use a gun on her. So overall, I will say that this looks to me most likely like a drug-related disappearance. Now, I want to end this podcast this week. We had a great, excellent show. A little bit choppy this week. I just want to quickly mention I did have my booster shot like the other day, and that Pfizer, it really, really hit me hard. So I was a little bit all over the place. I'm not feeling any side effects at this point. So really good show, man. Anything you want to mention before we close out this week's episode?
Yeah, I think we said it last week, but Happy New Year, everybody. Really happy to see the good numbers. Some One of our subscribers wished us happy 4K subscribers, and I agree. Thank you so much for that. But yeah, just really enjoying the comments. We do read every single one of them. So please, keep them coming, even when we don't get a chance to respond. We are building that suggestion list, and really love the support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys, and we will catch you on the next week's episode. And for now, I hope that everyone will have a great rest of the week, and stay safe, and peace out.